If you think absolute power corrupts absolutely, then what happens when a man begins to believe he is a god? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and comment below your thoughts. If you were a citizen of Rome during Emperor Commodus' reign, would you have dared to stand against him? Or would you have knelt before his madness? Because today, we're diving into one of the most bizarre and terrifying moments in Roman history. The year AD 192, when Emperor Commodus renamed Rome after himself, called it Colonia Commodiana, and then, in a grotesque twist, fought as a gladiator in the arena. This is the story of how an emperor's vanity pushed the greatest empire on earth to the brink of collapse, and how the eternal city nearly became the private playground of a man who thought he was Hercules reborn. Rome was already trembling when Commodus ascended the throne. He wasn't a soldier, nor a statesman. He was a boy born in silk, the son of the philosopher-emperor Marcus Aurelius, the very embodiment of Stoic virtue. When Marcus died in AD 180, Rome expected his son to continue the legacy of reason and strength. But instead, the empire watched as the boy emperor unraveled. Commodus was only 18 when he took power, charming at first, handsome, and well-spoken. But behind his youthful smile was a deep emptiness, a craving for attention, and a dangerous fascination with power. Where Marcus Aurelius had meditated on wisdom, Commodus stared into mirrors. Where his father had written about humility, Commodus demanded worship. Soon, whispers spread through the marble halls of Rome. The boy was not his father's son. He was his opposite. Marcus Aurelius had spent years preparing his son for the throne. He took Commodus on military campaigns, taught him philosophy, and surrounded him with advisors of virtue. But none of it mattered. When Marcus died on the Danube frontier, Commodus saw only one truth. He was now the center of the universe. He made peace with the enemies his father had fought for years, not out of compassion, but out of laziness. The legions returned home, but something was broken. Rome's warriors looked to their emperor and saw not a leader, but a boy who loved the games more than the battlefield. Back in Rome, the Senate welcomed him with open arms, hoping to guide him. But Commodus wasn't interested in being guided. He wanted to be adored. Commodus began to transform Rome into his personal theater. He surrounded himself with sycophants, flatterers, and entertainers. The Senate's debates no longer mattered. What mattered were spectacles. He built statues of himself, dressed as Hercules, club in hand, lion skin over his shoulders, muscles carved in marble to reflect his fantasy. He ordered artists to depict him as the savior of mankind, the new founder of Rome. Not Romulus, but Commodus, the divine son of Jupiter. Then, in a chilling declaration, he renamed the months of the calendar after his own titles. December became Commodus, October became Hercules, and the city itself, the eternal city that had stood for centuries, was renamed Colonia Commodiana. Rome, the heart of the world, was now Commodus' colony. Imagine walking through the streets of ancient Rome that winter of AD 192. Every statue bore the emperor's face. Every monument was inscribed with his name. Even the army swore oaths not to Rome, not to the Senate, but to Commodus alone. The once sacred phrase, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and people of Rome, was replaced by Commodus, the savior of the world. But Commodus was not content to rule as a god. He wanted to perform as one. It began with whispers that Commodus, the emperor of Rome, had been training with gladiators in secret. At first, the Senate laughed. Surely it was a joke. But the rumors grew darker. He had begun to appear in the Colosseum, not as a spectator, but as a fighter. The emperor who once wore a laurel crown now wore armor, carrying a wooden sword gilded with gold. His opponents were often crippled, starved, or drugged to ensure the emperor's victory. Every blow was choreographed, every cheer rehearsed. But to Commodus, it was not play acting, it was destiny. He declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, the protector of Rome, and demanded that the Senate recognize him as a living god. He slaughtered animals in the arena with his own hands, sometimes hundreds in a single day. Lions, elephants, even ostriches, while the crowd watched in stunned silence, too afraid not to cheer. Those who failed to applaud loud enough were executed. The Senate was humiliated. Rome's elite, men descended from centuries of heroes and conquerors, were forced to dress as gladiators, to march through the streets in mock parades honoring Commodus' victories. He renamed the legions, the gates, even the temples after himself. The people began to whisper that Rome had become cursed, that the gods had turned their faces away. Bread and games had always been Rome's way to keep peace among the masses. But Commodus' games were something else, a divine comedy performed by a madman. He demanded the title Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. To him, this was not arrogance. It was truth. Behind the facade of laughter and applause, fear spread like poison. In the provinces, governors whispered rebellion. In the legions, officers began to doubt their emperor's sanity. But Commodus' paranoia grew. He executed senators without trial. He accused his sister Lucilla of plotting against him, and had her executed. The palace became a labyrinth of fear, where servants vanished overnight, and spies listened behind every curtain. Commodus' nights were filled with drunken feasts and orgies, his days with blood and spectacle. He believed himself immortal, destined to rule not just Rome, but time itself. By AD 192, Commodus' madness had reached its zenith. He planned to refound the Remang Empire entirely under his own name. He would no longer be Emperor of Rome. He would be Emperor of the Commodian Empire. The legions would be called the Commodian Army. The Senate would become the Council of Commodus. Even the citizens would be renamed. All Romans would henceforth be known as Commodians. It was not just delusion. It was an attempt to erase history itself. Then came New Year's Eve, December 31st, AD 192. The night Commodus planned to unveil his greatest spectacle yet. He would enter the arena, dressed as Hercules, and symbolically slay the old year, the old Rome, in front of the crowd. Afterward, he would declare himself consul for life and rename every institution in his honor. But that night, Rome had other plans. His mistress Marcia discovered her name on a secret execution list. Commodus had grown suspicious of everyone, even her. Terrified, she joined forces with two others, Eclectus, the chamberlain, and Letus, the commander of the Praetorian Guard. They plotted in silence. That night, when Commodus prepared for his bath, Marcia handed him a poisoned drink. He began to vomit violently, but he didn't die. Fearing he might recover, Letus sent in a wrestler named Narcissus, a former gladiator and one of Commodus' own trainers. As the emperor struggled for breath, Narcissus wrapped a cord around his neck and strangled the god-king of Rome to death. Commodus, the emperor who renamed Rome after himself, died not in glory, but gasping in the steam of his own bath. When dawn broke on January 1st, AD 193, the city woke to silence. The Senate immediately declared Commodus a public enemy. His statues were torn down, his name chiseled off monuments, his memory cursed. Damnatio memoria. For a brief moment, Rome breathed again. But the damage had been done. The empire Marcus Aurelius had built through wisdom and discipline had been shattered by his own son's vanity. Within months, civil war erupted. 5 men would claim the throne in a single year, the year of the 5 emperors. Rome's golden age was over. Commodus' reign stands as one of the most chilling warnings in history. He inherited the mightiest empire on earth and nearly destroyed it through his obsession with self-worship. He wanted to be remembered as a god. Instead, history remembers him as a fool. But perhaps that's the tragedy of absolute power. It doesn't just corrupt, it isolates. When everyone around you is afraid to speak the truth, madness becomes the only voice left to listen to. So, what would you have done if you were in Rome during the reign of Commodus? Would you have shouted his name in the arena, or whispered in the shadows for his fall? Tell me in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into one of history's darkest chapters, make sure to subscribe for more stories of the emperors, warriors, and madmen who shaped our world. Because history isn't just a record of the past, it's a mirror showing us what power, pride, and madness can still do today.